Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Burns and today I'm going to be talking about hydropower and the externalities that surround this excellent source of energy. I will provide different charts and graphs to help aid in the visualization of how hydropower is used and to chart the economic impact it has on our national power grid. I will also cover the options we have for the future as we look to shift away from our dependence on fossil fuels. To get a better understanding of what hydropower is all about, I'd like to give you a little history. The first hydroelectric dam was built in Appleton, Wisconsin, along the Fox River. This dam wasn't a huge source of power, but it provided enough power for the plant itself, a building nearby, and the home of the man who built the dam, H. J. Rogers. By the 20th century, the innovation of hydropower became a significant source of cheap electric power all around the country. Hydropower also helped in fueling the industrial growth that was taking place at the same time. The diagram on this slide shows a basic rundown of how a hydroelectric dam operates. The process of making electricity starts when the water enters the dam through the sluice gates. Once inside the facility, it travels through a tunnel, also called a penstock, where it then reaches the turbines. As the water passes through the turbines, it creates an electromagnetic field where the generator is able to turn it into conventional electricity. After that, the newly created electricity travels through the powerhouse to the transformer. The transformer then converts the electricity into proper wattage and voltage, where it can then enter the regional power grid. Now there's a lot more that goes into making electricity, but the Cliff Notes version will work for this presentation. Now that we have some background information on the history of hydropower and how a hydroelectric dam operates, let's talk about how hydropower fits into our national power grid. The United States, as with most countries, is heavily reliant on fossil fuels as a source of energy. Petroleum, natural gas, and coal are our top three main sources of energy. Hydropower, on the other hand, only makes up about 7% of our total energy consumption. When you compare hydropower to other sources of renewable energy, it actually makes up about 26%. This makes hydropower our greatest source of renewable energy. As we look to shift away from detrimental fossil fuels, hydropower could be the answer we are looking for. Have you ever taken a road trip and marveled at the natural beauty of our country? The way that rivers cut their way through millions of years of rock give us majestic sights, such as the Grand Canyon in Arizona. Now, I want you to imagine that a new dam is going to be built on one of your favorite rivers. In order to capture the power of that river, you have to build a dam. The construction of the dam not only takes away from the aesthetics of the surrounding landscape, but it also creates a lasting impact to the local environment. The damage that's created in the construction of dams is my first example of a negative externality associated with hydropower. An externality is defined as a benefit or cost that affects someone who is not directly involved in the production or consumption of a good or service. Now I want to talk about the negative externalities directly associated with the river being dammed. A river is not just a body of water that meanders through the countryside. Rivers are extensive ecosystems that provide life to not only those organisms that live in the river, but also those organisms that live along or near the river. When you change the flow of a river, there are significant implications. Damming a river can restrict the flow of sediments from moving downstream. This creates a lasting impact on the different organisms that are dependent on the different cycles of the river. Another impact created by the restrictions of sediment flow is erosion. If a river is deprived of this natural cycle, the river will look for other sources of sediment. What this means is that the river will slowly begin to erode its bed and its banks, which could pose a serious threat to infrastructure such as bridges and other riverside structures. Fish migration is another negative externality caused by the creation of dams. In the Pacific Northwest, much of the fish affected by this are salmon. For thousands of years, salmon have hatched along the banks of rivers such as the Salmon, Columbia, and Clark Fork. Their life cycle consists of swimming downstream until they reach the Pacific Ocean. Once there, they would live out most of their existence until the time to spawn came. They would then retrace their long journey back up the river to spawn on the same beds as their parents. In the Columbia Basin, roughly 55% of spawning habitat that was once available to these fish have been lost due to the creation of dams. Dams not only create physical barriers that make passage tough for these fish, but it also changes the water levels. The location of their ancestral breeding grounds may now be much deeper underwater, rendering them unusable. Adult fish aren't the only ones affected by dams. Juvenile fish have their own unique challenges that they have to deal with. When juvenile fish begin their journey to the ocean, chances are they will have to navigate a dam. Sometimes these small fish find themselves inside the penstock and eventually pass through the turbines. Because the blades of the turbine spin at a high rate of speed, the mortality rate for these fish is high. Now that we have discussed the negative externalities associated with hydropower, let's discuss the positive externalities. Hydropower is considered to be a clean and renewable source of energy because it only uses the power of the river. By using hydropower, we are able to avoid by putting over 225 million metric tons of carbon pollutions into the atmosphere each year. That's the equivalent to the pollution of about 42 million cars. Remember that hydropower only accounts for about 7% of the total energy consumption. Imagine if hydropower accounted for 25% of the national consumption. What would carbon pollution levels look like? Hydropower also plays a role in the economy. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are about 6,000 people who are currently employed in jobs directly associated with hydroelectric power generation. The annual mean wage for these workers is about $68,000. Another way hydropower helps the economy is with its consistency. In a world that's constantly changing, having the ability to consistently produce electricity is very important. Hydropower is unique when it comes to power generation. A hydroelectric dam can go from zero to max output at the flip of a switch. This makes hydropower a great addition to the national power grid because it has the ability to handle different spikes in the demand of electricity. Reservoirs can be an added benefit from the construction of hydroelectric dams. They can provide recreational options such as fishing, boating, camping, and many other activities that can take place around large bodies of water. Reservoirs are also a great way to store drinking water and can help provide irrigation to farmers and ranchers that live and work in the region. It's clear that hydropower poses many ethical and social questions about its operation. On the positive side, hydropower is able to provide clean and renewable energy, it's a good source of quality employment, and its flexibility is a great asset to the national and local power grids. On the downside, the impact that the creation of hydroelectric dams have on fish populations is very detrimental. Dams also prevent vital sediments from making their way downriver, which poses threats to infrastructures such as bridges. And dams also take away from the geological aesthetics that are created by river basins. So, a big question for me is what is currently being done to combat these negative externalities? The United States has more than 80,000 dams of varying sizes that have been built on rivers and small streams. The crazy thing is, only about 3% of those dams are used in the production of electricity. In an effort to bring back certain fish populations, some of these dams are being destroyed. In the areas where these dams have been destroyed, whole ecosystems, including fish and plant life, have made an impressive recovery. Another option for these dams is to have them retrofitted in order to produce electricity, or to improve the efficiency of systems already in place. Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts says that by retrofitting these old dams, an additional 60,000 megawatts of hydropower is achievable within 15 years. That's the same generating capacity as 60 nuclear reactors. Dam builders have also taken new measures to help aid fish migration. They have incorporated fish ladders, which are basically a way for fish to bypass the physical structure of the dam. While it's not a perfect solution, at least it's an option. The future of hydropower is uncertain. The trend seems to be moving away from large scale dam production, and the reason for this is that smaller dams can be ran more efficiently and also have less of an impact on the environment. There is also talk among coastal countries to try and harness the power of ocean tides. This is still a relatively new concept that hasn't been tested on a large scale. Europe and Asia are the leading innovators in this sector. Hydropower, as a source of energy production, is a clean and renewable source. If designers and engineers are able to capture these negative externalities and find viable solutions, the possibilities for the future of hydropower look bright. As long as we continue to move away from fossil fuel consumption, hydropower will always be a topic of discussion.